let's actually talk about how we're going to do this in each of the languages. So I'm going to start talking about Java, and then I'm going to talk about C# for just a moment. So over in IntelliJ, you're going to need to do a little bit of additional work in order to be able to draw and do these Java FX, which is the name of the library that we're going to be using for all of the graphics and all of the UI work. So Java FX is a library that provides you with the ability to do all the windowing across platforms. And what I mean by that is it works in Windows, it works in Mac, it works on Android, it works everywhere that you can run Java. That's an important detail because the way that windowing is done is quite different in each one of those operating systems. So by comparison, you're going to find that a lot of the work that we do in C# is just going to be a lot easier, and that's partially because for C# it's running in Windows. So there's a predefined set of how the windows work, and they can code specifically to that. Whereas in Java, they're having to deal with the fact that you might be on an Android phone or you might be on a Windows machine, and those work quite differently from a graphical standpoint. All right, so you're first going to need to install a library. So as you probably know, the Java Development Kit is what's running on the bottom end that is actually doing the running of Java when you're executing stuff. So the Java Development Kit that you're going to need is a particular one. It is version 13 of the Zulu build. At the moment, there is up to version 15, but you very specifically want to get version 13. So the link that you need is right here on the slides. It's also posted, and there's a video showing you how to do this exact thing on the FYE site, on CCSE/FYE. And I believe it's underneath resources, and I think it's about halfway down. Yes, there we go. If your language is Java, you'll need to install, for 1322, install the Java FX plugin by watching this video. So that video very much steps you through what I'm showing you here. So you click this link, you're going to download it, you're going to unzip it in a particular directory, and then when you open IntelliJ to actually specify that you want a Java FX module or program, you're going to specify that you want to use that particular JDK. So let's show you how that's going to work. So here I am, this is IntelliJ, I'm going to say it is a new project, and up until now you've been clicking Java, and you've just been basic Java, but we're instead going to click Java FX, and then under the project SDK, you may have more than one option in here, but the very specific one that you need to select is 13 Java version 13.04, which is the one that you just installed. If it's not there, you're going to hit Add JDK, and you're going to dig around until you find where you put it. And off the top of my head, I don't know if I even remember where I put it, but I think it is on my desktop, which is under Users. Yeah, there it is. So that's what you downloaded in the previous step from that link that's on the slide. And this is the directory that you would choose. You would hit OK, and now magically that will appear as one of your options. So you selected Java FX. You chose the correct SDK. If you don't do that, it will not work. And to be clear, Java FX will appear as an option even if the SDK is not there. So if you do not have that exact thing as an option, you have not done the other step, and that's why it's not working. All right, and then I'm going to hit next. It's going to ask me for a name for my project. We're going to call this Lecture 12, I guess. And then Java is going to, or IntelliJ is going to dig around for just a moment, and then it's eventually going to give me a new project. If I expand out my source, you're going to notice that it gives you a little basic window. And inside of that window, it's going to do a hello world. If I hit build on this project, and then I come back and I say run, what's going to happen after it's done with its build, which takes just a second, I'm going to get a little hello world window. If you do not get that window, it's not going to work. You need to go back and do the SDK thing, and you need to keep fighting that until you get the hello world window, because there's no point in coding unless you can see that hello world window. So super important that you do that step before you go any further. All right, so cool, we have the hello world window, and they do give you a nice little bit of code here. You can start to see that you could obviously set the title, that's where that is, and you could specify the height. So that window that we were looking at apparently is 300 by 275. In Java, there is a concept of a stage. They want you to think about a performance theater, where you would have a stage that actors act on. The stage is made up of different scenes. Only one scene is visible at any given time, but there are probably many scenes in a play. So you might have a scene where it's, a house, and then a moment later you might have a scene where they're in a bar, and then a moment later you might have another scene where they're in a field. And each of those scenes are going to look very different, and you will program all of the scenes ahead of time, and then whenever you're ready for it, you will say stage show scene 1, and then poof, the stage will magically become scene 1. Inside of the scene, you will then have a layout that specifies where everything is. This is where the metaphor kind of gets a bit goofy. So I mentioned before that often we deal with grids and tables and stuff like that. And we looked at the little calculator app, and I said this is a grid. So typically you're going to use either a grid pane or a tile pane, which means that they're stacked on top of each other or next to each other as tiles, or a tab pane, which is where you have more than one tab inside of a window like up here, or a scroll pane, which allows you to scroll, obviously, horizontal boxes and vertical boxes, and those are very common ones. A horizontal box would be something like this, where you have a bunch of buttons that are just in a row in one horizontal row. A vertical box would be something like this, where you have a bunch of buttons that are in a vertical row. So you will lay out the scene using one of those layouts most likely. Then inside of each of those layouts, you're going to put the actual things that you want to put, which might be labels, which are text items, or a canvas if you're going to go drawing, or maybe it's a table or a text area or radio buttons or any of the other things that we talked about. And it's a long list of what could be in there. So the order is you have a stage, which is a window. Inside the stage, you have a scene, which is maybe the whole window, maybe only part of the window. And then inside of a scene, you have a layout. And then inside of the layout, you have the individual items that you might want to put. And the layout determines how they're laid out inside that scene. All right, so hopefully that makes some sense. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to draw some basic shapes. I'm going to draw a very exciting line and a very exciting circle, which I'm going to fill in because that's fancy. All right, so over in IntelliJ, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with what they gave us, which was the basic code, and we're just going to take a look at that. So the slide mentions what's happening here, and what you have is you have a main method, which is our main class, which is extending something called application. This is always going to be true. Your main class is going to extend application. Furthermore, your main method inside your main class is always going to magically call something called launch and pass it the arguments. The arguments are what came into the main function, which is probably nothing. All right, why are we doing this? Because this is how JavaFX works. You are always going to override sorry, yes, I was like, that is totally not the right thing. You are always going to extend application, you are always going to call launch from your main, and then you are always going to override a method called start. Start is what gets called when the application launches, and it's what decides how the windows are built and where everything goes. So start may then call other things, but this basic structure is always going to have to be here. You're always going to extend application, you're always going to have a main method that calls launch, and you're always going to override start. What else you may do is dependent on what it is that you're trying to do. So that's a little bit goofy. I will say it's very nice that IntelliJ automatically gives you an example, so you'll never actually have to type that. You just have to start off with a JavaFX application, and you will at least have the shell that you're always going to have. So then inside of that start method, that's where we're actually going to do our thing. So you can see here, it creates a scene, and that scene is a new scene, and it is 300 by 275, and it is setting the primary stage to that scene. So it creates a scene, and then it sets the stage to that scene. And then at the very end, it says show, which is what actually causes the window to pop open. If you don't call show, nothing happens. All right, so what are we going to do here? So we always have to do this override, and you're always going to have a layout, and then you're going to have groups in your layouts, and so on and so on and so on. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a couple of new things inside of here. So I'm going to comment out this line, and I'll explain this line in more detail later. It's related to this, which is related to Scene Builder, which allows me to build it by dragging and dropping. I'm going to show you how that works later on in the video, but that's not relevant to what we're doing in this first example. So I'm commenting out this first line, which again was inserted by IntelliJ as a hint on how to use the magical drag and drop GUI inside of IntelliJ. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do in my new method is I'm going to create a group. And so the way that I do that is I'm going to say group, I'm going to call it root, you can call it whatever you want, gets new group. And as you will notice quickly, it says, that's not actually in your import list. You're going to find that as you're doing this, you're going to need a bunch of stuff added to your import list. So IntelliJ has the nice feature of Shift, Alt, and Enter, giving you the options. Many of these words exist in more than one thing because swing is a different GUI method inside of Java, which we no longer use, but a lot of people used it in the past. So you will find that there's going to be a Java FX version of many of these things, and there's going to be a swing version of many of these things, and then the word group is also used in security ACLs. So you need to make sure you're including the correct thing. And there you go, it's Java scene group. Java FX scene group is what it included. All right, so what have I done so far? Well, I've created something to hold my canvas, which is the next thing that I'm going to create. And then I'm going to put this canvas into the group, and then I'm going to put the group into the scene, and the scene is already in the stage, and that all makes perfect sense. All right, so let's create a canvas. So I'm going to say canvas, I'll call it canvas1, equals new canvas. I'll make it 300 by 200. All right, and again, we're going to choose Java FX scene canvas. Great. Okay, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it that that canvas is in a context of drawing in 2D. So I'm going to say graphics context, and I'll call it GC. You can call it whatever you want. That's a variable name. Gets canvas1, which is the name of my canvas that I just made, dot get graphics context 2D. Okay, and I'm going to put in my semicolon. And I also have the same problem again. So this time we're going to, I said that I had already done that, but I guess I didn't. There we go. And so that adds in JavaFX scene canvas graphics context. Okay, cool. So now I have a graphics context. Now I can actually start drawing things. So I'm going to say graphics context dot fill oval, and my oval is going to be from 1060 to 3030. These are just random numbers. I'm basically drawing a oval, which is going to be a particular shape. It's going to be a circle, and that is a filled oval, which is going to have the effect of it being filled in. So it's going to be a solid oval. All right. Next up, I'm going to set a. I'm going to make a line. gc.stroke line. And I'm going to start at 4010, and I'm going to go to 1040, which is going to be a diagonal line. And again, these are values that are specified as xy, xy, likewise up here. In this case, it's xy width and height is what the oval actually takes. So each one of them takes slightly different things. Stroke line also needs to be added. Why you no do? Okay. I think I have everything I need. I have group, I have scene, I have canvas, graphics, context, stage. Yeah, I don't think that's actually a problem. Okay. All right, and then now we actually need to add our canvas to our group. I'll explain this bit in just a second. So I'm going to say root dot get children dot add canvas 1. And then I'm going to change my scene to no longer be this new scene that it was a moment ago. It's now just going to be scene 1, which I previously defined in there. Did I ever produce the scene? I never produced the scene. I apologize. It's going to be scene 1, new scene, root, being the group that's in there. All right, I'm going to get rid of this hello world, and I'm going to ask it to build and find all of the silly things that I did wrong. All right, stroke line, int, cannot find symbol. Did I spell it wrong? STROKELANE. I did not. Why is that not working? I have all the bits in there, and it was okay with fill oval. Why is it not okay with stroke line? All right, we're going to type it again just to make sure that I'm not crazy, and it's line 40, 10, 10, 40. Oh, I spelled it wrong. That's why. Brilliant. That's also why it was highlighted wrong in the beginning. All right, build again. Hey, look at that. That seems like that did something. Let's run it. And what I should see is a canvas with a line and a circle. And indeed I do. And of course I could move those around, X and Y. So I moved this over 10 and then down 60. This was the oval. That's about 60 pixels from the top, and that's about 10 pixels from the left. And then its width was 30 pixels and its height was 30 pixels. If I bump these up to 60 wide, then you're going to get an oval because, well, ovals are wider than they are long. So you can see what's happening there. So I'm able to draw basic shapes. Yay! There are also other things I can do. Like, for example, the line has a width. So I can say gc.setLineWidth, and I can set it to 10. And that's going to be a much thicker line than we had just a moment ago. So that's what it looks like now. I'm going to build, and then I'm going to run. And I am going to learn to type capital letters. I'm also going to learn to actually use the autocomplete. I grew up in a world where we didn't have autocomplete. Back in my day, we didn't have. Okay, there we go. So you can see much thicker line, yay. There's also a million options that you can do. It can be a dash line, you can have a curve line, you can have all kinds of fun things like that. So this is how you draw basic canvas shapes inside of Java. The confusing parts were you're always going to override, I always highlight the wrong part and then get confused. You're always going to extend application, that has to happen. You're always going to override start, and you're always going to have this main method that calls launch. And then inside of here, the weirdness is that you're going to have multiple different layers of stuff. So in this case, I wanted a canvas. The problem with a canvas is you can't put a canvas directly into a scene. You can only put canvases into groups. So I defined a group that has nothing in it but a canvas, and then I added the group to the scene, which is permitted. So there has to be some form of a layout method. A group has no layout. It just says everything goes in the top left corner, don't care. So that's why I'm using group. I could have also done a grid of some form and then put the canvas in a particular corner of the grid and then done other stuff around it if that's what I had wanted to do. So that's why I used a group called root. So I created a group. I then created a canvas. I set the canvas to 2D because there's also an option for 3D. I created the lines and all of the things that are inside of the canvas. So this is where I actually did the work of drawing on the canvas. And then the last couple of lines here, I set the canvas to be inside of the group. And then I set the scene to look at the group, which ties the scene, the canvas to the group, to the scene, to the window, which is why you actually see it in the window. All right. So that is how we would do this in Java. The code that we just wrote is here on the slide if you want to copy it along. So what can you actually do with these? So this is not a complete list. It's just kind of to get you started. This is the Java list of methods. This is the C# list of methods. I didn't list the two that I already used. So like I obviously used fill ellipse, and I also used draw line, and those are the C# ones. I don't think they're actually listed in here. And likewise over here. You'll find that for most everything there is a stroke or a draw, which draws the outline of it, and then there is going to be a fill in both languages, which actually fills it in. So the circle that I used was a filled circle. The other type of circle obviously would be a unfilled circle. So if you drew ellipse, or I think there are two L's in ellipse, and I think that's a typo. Anyway, and likewise over here, there is stroke oval. If I used either of those, I would get the outline. The way that they're called is ever so slightly different, and like most things I'm going to tell you, you're probably just going to need to look up each of them. So for example, if I go to stroke oval in Java FX, and I pull up their documentation from the Oracle site, you're going to see that one thing that's particularly odd about the oval is that you actually put a rectangle. You use a rectangle first, and then you tell it to draw the oval inside of the rectangle. So some of them are going to be very specific about things like that. And so, yeah, where is stroke oval? There it is. Okay, so the particulars here, stroke and oval. Okay, well, I lied about that. It's the other language. It's not C#. It's Java that requires you to do that. So let's see. No, actually, I got stroke oval. Is there a stroke oval in both? Or do I have this backwards? Well, that doesn't fill me with confidence. I'm going to pause for just a second and validate that I didn't mess up on the slide and put these in the wrong order. Okay, I'm just losing my mind. Yes, that was Java. There was nothing wrong on the slide. It was correct. I just thought that this was somehow giving me documentation for C#. It is not. So stroke oval indeed is Java, and it just works the same as the fill one. You give it the X and Y coordinates, and then you give it the height and the width. It is the C# version of it that's the weird one. So draw ellipse. In order to draw an ellipse, you first define a rectangle that is the size that you want the ellipse to be, and then you simply tell it to draw an ellipse with the pen inside of the rectangle, and it fills the rectangle with the ellipse in whatever shape the rectangle happened to be. That's just strange, and it's odd that it doesn't do the same thing when you do a fill ellipse. It just takes in the 4 parameters as we saw. So my point of all of this is that you need to look at the documentation for each of these methods, because the way that they're called is slightly different. And especially some of them allow you to draw almost arbitrary lines, which can have arcs in them. And this is how you would define drawing a character in a video game. You would have lots of arcs and lots of detail inside of there. And so you have a whole lot of parameters that you can pass in there as to how far you want the arc to span between 2 different places. Do you want a fill closed arc, or do you want it to be an open arc, and so on and so on and so on. There's a million different options for each of these, but they all basically work the same way. You need a graphics context, which is going to be what you're actually drawing on, just like I did here in this example. So this is how you draw in both of the languages. The details of exactly how the methods work, you're going to have to look them up when you go to actually call them, but you can see that this would allow you to draw an image. There are also ones in here that directly take in actual JPEGs or GIFs. There's an equivalent one over here. It is draw image. There it is. So they also support the ability to load in other data into the background and then draw over it, which you might need to do for certain circumstances if you want to load a background image and then have your characters moving on front of the background image, and so on and so forth. There's also the ability to move things after you have done them and to animate them so that they're actually moving, but that's beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about here today, because this lecture is already going to be really long and you're probably already bored. All right, so this is how you draw inside of C# and inside of Java.